While cleaning out my late grandmother's house, I found a hidden letter she had written to the great-grandchild she would never meet. It was dated 50 years in the future. I thought it was just a sweet, sentimental gesture, until I read the part that contained a warning about my greedy cousin and the secret financial weapon she had left behind to stop him. This is a story about a message from beyond the grave. Before we open that letter, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? And be sure to subscribe for our daily stories. Okay, let's head to that old dining room table. The silence in my grandmother Adelaide's house was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It had been a week since her funeral, and I was now the sole, temporary custodian of her world, a world contained within the four walls of this small, book-filled, and now painfully quiet house. Every object held a memory. The worn spot on the floral armchair where she sat every evening to read, the faint, sweet scent of lavender and old paper that clung to the curtains. The house was not just a building. It was the last tangible piece of her that I had left, and my grief was so profound it felt like a physical weight, a pressure on my chest that made it hard to breathe. She had been more than a grandmother to me. She had been my anchor, my confidant, my one true ally in a family that had often felt like a collection of strangers. A fact that was made brutally clear by the arrival of my cousin, Donovan. He didn't knock. He just used his key and walked in, a real estate agent trailing in his wake like a well-heeled vulture. Donovan was my opposite in every way. Where I was quiet and sentimental, he was loud and ruthlessly practical. He was a man who saw the world not as a place of memories, but as a series of assets to be liquidated. "Fiona," he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful for a house of mourning. "This is Brenda from Prescott Realty. She thinks we can get this place on the market by Friday. The timing is perfect. We could have a closing by the end of the month." I just stared at him, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. "Donovan," I said, my voice quiet, "she's only been gone a week. Can we please just have a moment to breathe?" He let out an impatient sigh, the sound of a busy man being inconvenienced by another's grief. "Fiona, be realistic," he said, his tone condescending, as if explaining a simple concept to a difficult child. "It's a great time to sell. We can get a fortune for this place, and we can split it 50-50, just as the will states. Don't let your sentimentality get in the way of a smart business decision. It's what Grandma Adelaide would have wanted." No, it wasn't, I wanted to scream. What she would have wanted was for her family to gather in this house and share stories, to laugh, to cry, to remember her. But I said nothing. Arguing with Donovan was like arguing with a brick wall. After they left, leaving a cloud of expensive cologne and cheap ambition in their wake, I was left with the sickening realization that my time in this sanctuary was limited. I had to begin the heartbreaking task of sorting through her belongings, of packing up a lifetime of love into a series of cardboard boxes. I started in the dining room. The centerpiece of the room was her old, magnificent, and massive oak dining table. It had been in our family for 100 years. It was the place of 1,000 Sunday dinners, of every Christmas and every Thanksgiving of my entire life. I ran my hand over its smooth, worn surface, my fingers tracing the small nicks and scratches, each one a scar with a story. It was as I was wiping down the intricate, hand-carved legs of the table that my fingers brushed against it. A small, almost invisible piece of the carved floral pattern that felt loose. My curiosity piqued. I pushed it. There was a soft, satisfying click, and a small, perfectly hidden, drawer-like compartment, no bigger than a book, sprang open from the side of the table. My heart began to pound. A secret compartment. It was exactly the kind of whimsical, clever thing my grandmother would have loved. I peered inside. It was not empty. Lying on a bed of faded dark blue velvet was a single, thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with a wax stamp of her initial, A, and on the front, in her familiar, elegant, and beautiful handwriting, were 4 simple words. To my first great-grandchild. A wave of love and a fresh new grief washed over me. A letter to the future. A message to a child she would now never meet. I was not yet married, had no children. This was a message from her to my future, to my legacy. My hands trembling, I carefully broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. I unfolded the brittle, heavy paper, a bittersweet smile on my face, ready to read my grandmother's final, loving words of wisdom to a generation she would never know. But then, as my eyes fell upon the top of the page, my smile froze. The world, for a second, seemed to stop making sense. I was expecting a date from the past, but the date she had so carefully, so deliberately written at the top of the page was not from the past at all. It read, August 14th, 2075. I sat on the dusty floor of my grandmother's dining room, the single folded sheet of paper in my hand. The date, August 14th, 2075, seemed to mock me from the top of the page. My mind, a rational 21st century instrument, scrambled for a logical explanation. It was a typo, a simple mistake, or, and this felt far more likely, it was one last whimsical and deeply eccentric joke from a woman who had always had a mischievous twinkle in her eye. My grandmother, Adelaide, had always been a woman who played the long game. I just had no idea how long that game truly was. With a heart that was a confused, aching mixture of profound grief and a new, almost fearful curiosity, I began to read the words she had left for a person who did not yet exist. I began to read her letter to my future child. To my dearest great-grandchild. Her familiar, elegant script began. If you are reading this, then I am long since gone, a ghost in the stories your mother, Fiona, will tell you. I hope she tells you the good ones. I hope she tells you about the time we baked a 6-layer cake for her 10th birthday and used salt instead of sugar by mistake. I hope she tells you about the summer we spent in this house, reading old, dusty adventure novels aloud to each other. I am writing this because there are things a grandmother needs to tell her legacy, and I am afraid I will not be there to say them in person. The tears started then, hot and silent, dropping onto the brittle, ancient-feeling paper. I was reading a love letter sent across time. I want you to know, the letter continued, that this house, the one your mother is likely sitting in as she reads this to you, is more than just wood and nails. It is a library of our family's laughter, a museum of our joy. It is the heart of who we are. And a family's heart is a precious and a fragile thing. It must be protected. It was then that the tone of the letter began to shift. The warm, grandmotherly nostalgia was replaced by something else, something sharp, strategic, and brilliant. But a family is also a complicated thing, my dearest child, and I am writing this letter not just as a message of love, but as a warning and as a weapon. I have dated this letter 50 years in the future because it is a message about the future of this family. A future that is now and forever in your mother, Fiona's, hands to protect. My breath caught in my throat. This was not just a sentimental letter. This was a set of instructions. I have watched my grandson, your mother's cousin, Donovan, for many years. He is not a bad man, but his heart is buried under a mountain of greed and a desperate, gnawing need for the appearance of success. I fear that after I am gone, in his haste to liquidate what he sees as a simple asset, he will try to sell this house, this heart of our family, for a quick and easy profit. He will see your mother's love for this place, her sentimentality, as a weakness to be exploited. He will not understand that it is her greatest strength." I had to stop reading, a cold, chilling shock washing over me. It was as if my grandmother were in the room with me, narrating the very conversation I had had with Donovan just an hour before. I took a deep, shuddering breath and continued to read. "What Donovan does not know," the letter went on, and I could almost hear the mischievous, triumphant twinkle in my grandmother's voice, "is that years ago, seeing this day coming, I took certain precautions. Using the bulk of my late husband's estate, I secretly established a private holding company, a quiet, unassuming little entity called Adelaide's Legacy Holdings. Over the years, that company, under my sole direction, has been making some very specific investments. It has been quietly and legally acquiring mortgage debt." My heart was now hammering against my ribs. "And the two largest, most significant debts my little company now holds," she wrote, and I could feel the checkmate coming, "are the mortgage on this very house, and, more importantly, the commercial mortgage on the large, shiny, and very expensive office building in the city that houses your cousin Donovan's successful business. The proof of these transactions, the original deeds and loan documents, are in a second sealed envelope, right here in this same compartment." My hands, trembling, fumbled in the secret drawer, and there it was, a second, thicker envelope filled with crisp, official, and legally binding documents. I stared at them, at the proof of my grandmother's brilliant, posthumous, and utterly ruthless chess move. I finished the last paragraph of her letter. "So you see, my dearest great-grandchild, the future of this family is now a simple matter. Your mother Fiona now controls this holding company. She is, for all intents and purposes, her cousin Donovan's landlord and his banker. He does not know it yet. But he will. This power is not a weapon for revenge. It is a tool for justice. It is a shield to protect this home, to protect our family's heart." I sat there on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of my grandmother's secret strategic genius, and I was completely and totally in awe. She had not just been a sweet, kind old woman, she had been a warrior, a silent protector who had been planning for this very moment for years. Just then, my phone buzzed, the sound a jarring intrusion into the sacred silence. It was a text message from my cousin, Donovan. "Fiona," it read. His tone the familiar, condescending one of a man used to getting his way. "I've spoken with the realtor again. We have an incredible all-cash offer on the house, but we have to accept by tomorrow morning. I'm emailing you the papers to sign now. Don't be emotional. It's a fantastic deal." I looked at his arrogant, demanding words on my phone screen. I then looked at the legal documents in my hand, the proof that I, in fact, held all the power, that I owned his entire professional world. I took a deep breath, and I began to text him back. "Send them over, Donovan," I wrote, my own voice now a calm, quiet instrument of my grandmother's incredible, long-dormant will. "I will be sure to give them a very, very close look." I spent the rest of that day and the entire night in a state of profound, almost reverent shock. I sat on the floor of my grandmother's living room, surrounded by the legal documents that represented her final, brilliant act of checkmate, and the letters that revealed the deep, strategic, and fiercely protective heart of the woman I had only ever known as a sweet, gentle soul. She had not just been my grandmother. She had been a queen, quietly arranging her chess pieces for years, preparing for a final game that would be played long after she had left the board. And she had just named me as her successor. The old Fiona, the quiet, conflict-averse woman who had always tried to keep the peace, would have been terrified by the power I now held. But as I read and reread my grandmother's words, her strength, her foresight, her quiet, unshakable sense of justice seemed to seep into my own soul. I was not just her granddaughter anymore. I was the executor of her will in the truest sense of the word. My plan was not one of immediate, explosive confrontation. That was Donovan's style. My grandmother's style, and now mine, was one of quiet, deliberate, and inescapable strategy. The next morning, I made a phone call. It was to the lawyer listed on the holding company's official documents, a man I had never heard of. When I told him my name and my grandmother's and mentioned the secret compartment, there was a long, respectful silence on the other end of the line. "I have been waiting for this call for 5 years, Miss Vance," he finally said, his voice full of a warm, professional admiration. "Your grandmother was the most remarkable woman I have ever had the privilege to represent. Her instructions for me were very, very specific. I am, as of this moment, entirely at your disposal." He spent the next hour walking me through the full, brilliant scope of my grandmother's financial web. She had not just bought the mortgages. She had structured the holding company in such a way that I now had a controlling interest in the financial levers of my cousin's entire life. He was not just in my debt. For all intents and purposes, he now worked for me. Armed with this new and terrible knowledge, I agreed to the meeting. Not at a lawyer's office. At the house. At the dining room table where I had found the secret. The stage had to be perfect. Donovan arrived with the real estate agent, Brenda, in tow. He was brimming with an arrogant, impatient confidence. He had the signed sales contracts in his hand, a triumphant look on his face. He saw the meeting as a final, tedious formality before his big payday. "Fiona," he said, forgoing any greeting as he slid the documents across the table. "Brenda has the notary with her. Let's get this over with. Just sign here, here, and here, and we can all be on our way." I did not look at the papers. I just looked at him. "It's a beautiful table, isn't it, Donovan?" I asked, my voice a quiet, conversational tone that seemed to throw him off balance. "What?" he asked, irritated. "It's a table. It's old. It's probably worth a bit. Now, are you going to sign?" "My great-grandfather built it," I continued, my voice still soft, "with his own 2 hands. Grandma told me it was the heart of this house, the heart of this family. And you want to sell it for a quick profit?" He let out an exasperated sigh. "Fiona, we have been over this. I am not going to let your childish sentimentality get in the way of a fantastic business deal. Now, for the last time, sign the papers." "You're right, Donovan," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "You're a businessman, and this is a business deal. So let's talk about business." I reached under the table and pulled out the thick, legal-looking folder my grandmother's lawyer had couriered to me that morning. I slid the first document across the polished surface of the table to him. "This," I said, "is the current mortgage deed for this house. As you can see, the loan is held by a private company, a company called Adelaide's Legacy Holdings." He stared at the document, a look of pure, baffled confusion on his face. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "I assure you it is not," I said. I slid a second, much thicker document across the table. "And this," I continued, "is the commercial mortgage agreement for your beautiful modern office building downtown, the one you are so proud of. As you can see, by a strange and remarkable coincidence, the loan for that building is also held by Adelaide's Legacy Holdings." I let him process this, watching as his arrogant confidence began to crumble, replaced by a dawning, frantic unease. The realtor, Brenda, was just looking back and forth between us, her own professional smile now a frozen, nervous grimace. "And this," I said, as I slid the final, single sheet of paper across the table towards him. "This," I said, "is the most recent corporate filing for that same holding company." He stared at the paper. It listed the company's sole director and 100% shareholder. He read the name, my name, Fiona Vance. "Which means, cousin," I said, my voice now a quiet, final, and utterly inescapable whisper, "that I am your banker, I am your landlord, and the sale of this house, the heart of our family, is now and forever off the table. The meeting is over. You can show yourselves out." He stared at the papers, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The arrogant, confident man who had walked into this room so sure of his own power had vanished. replaced by a cornered, terrified man who was finally, for the first time in his life, beginning to understand the concept of consequences. The realtor, Brenda, looked back and forth between us, her professional smile now a frozen rictus of pure, uncomprehending panic. It was Donovan who broke the silence, his voice a choked, strangled whisper. "Fiona, wait," he stammered. This is a misunderstanding. We can talk about this. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? Name your price. I'll cut you a bigger share of the sale." I almost laughed. It was so perfectly him. Even now, with his entire world crumbling around him, his own language was money. He was a man so spiritually bankrupt that he could not comprehend a motive that wasn't based on a price tag. "It was never about the money, Donovan," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying the full, unshakable weight of my grandmother's will. "It's about this house. It's about our family. It's about legacy. Concepts," I added, my voice as cold as ice, "that I know are a little foreign to you." I stood up and began to pace the length of the old dining room, the very room where my grandmother had presided over decades of family dinners, her quiet, steady presence the heart of our world. I felt her with me now, her strength flowing through me. I was no longer just her grieving granddaughter. I was the instrument of her final, brilliant lesson. Let's be very clear about the new reality of our situation. First, the sale of this house is canceled, permanently. "This house," I said, running my hand along the back of my grandmother's empty chair, "will remain in this family, as a gathering place, under my sole and exclusive stewardship. That is not a point of negotiation. It is a statement of fact." The realtor, Brenda, seeing her commission evaporate before her very eyes, quietly began to pack her briefcase. "Second," I continued, turning my full attention back to my pale, trembling cousin, "let's talk about your business. As of this morning, when my grandmother's lawyer officially transferred control to Adelaide's Legacy Holdings to me, I have become your banker, your sole creditor. And after reviewing the terms of your commercial mortgage, I see that your entire loan is up for a discretionary review. I could, if I wanted to, call in the entire multi-million-dollar debt effective immediately. And you and I both know you do not have the liquid assets to cover it. I could bankrupt you, Donovan. I could take your business, your house, your car, everything. Your entire perfect, successful life is, as of this moment, entirely in my hands." He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. "But," I said, and I let the word hang in the air, "a single, fragile lifeline. My grandmother, in her letter, was very specific. She did not want me to destroy you. She wanted me to re-educate you. She wanted me to teach you the lessons she had tried and failed to teach you her entire life. The lesson that a legacy is about more than just profit." I walked back to the table and laid out my terms. "So, here is my offer. You will continue to run your business, but the terms of your loan have changed. As your new banker, I am instituting a new permanent clause in our agreement. From this day forward, 20% of your company's quarterly profits will be paid, not to you as a bonus, but as a mandatory charitable donation to a new foundation I am establishing in our grandmother's name." I smiled, a slow, cold smile. "A foundation," I concluded, "that will be dedicated to funding all the sentimental, unprofitable things you and my grandmother used to argue about. Local art programs, historical preservation societies, community gardens for the underprivileged. You, my dear cousin, are going to spend the rest of your very profitable career funding the arts." He looked at me, the full, beautiful, and inescapable irony of his new reality finally dawning on him. He was trapped. "Those are the terms," I said, my voice now a final, quiet whisper. "You will sign a new agreement to that effect, right now. Or I will instruct my lawyer to begin foreclosure proceedings on your entire life by the end of business on Friday." I pushed a new set of documents, which my grandmother's lawyer had so thoughtfully prepared for me, across the table. "The choice is yours." He stared at the papers, his face a ruin of defeated rage. He had walked into this house a king, so sure of his own power, so dismissive of my own, and he was now about to leave it a vassal, a servant to his own grandmother's posthumous and deeply poetic sense of justice. The test I didn't even know I was a part of was over. He had failed, and now I, his quiet, sentimental, and foolish little cousin, was the woman who owned his entire future. My grandmother's lesson was about to begin, and as I looked at his terrified, humbled face, I knew with a profound and absolute certainty that class was now officially in session. My cousin, Donovan, stared at the legal documents on the table, his face a ghastly mask of disbelief. The air in the dining room was thick and heavy with the weight of his defeat. He looked from the papers to me and back again, his mind, so quick in calculating when it came to profit and loss, now struggling to comprehend this new, impossible variable. He was no longer the predator. He was the prey. "You're bluffing," he finally whispered, the words a pathetic, last-ditch effort to reclaim some semblance of control. "This is insane. You can't do this." "Can't I?" I replied, my voice a quiet, calm instrument that was a perfect echo of my grandmother's own strength. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "My lawyer, Mr. Davies, is waiting for my call. I can instruct him to file the foreclosure papers on your business right now. Your assets would be frozen by the end of the business day. We can test my bluff, if you'd like." Or I pushed the new agreement I had brought with me across the table. "You can sign." He looked at me, at my calm, unshakable resolve. And in my eyes, he did not see his foolish, sentimental little cousin anymore. He saw his grandmother. And he knew, in that moment, that he had absolutely and completely lost. The surrender was not a graceful one. With a hand that trembled with a barely suppressed, impotent rage, he snatched a pen and signed the documents. He did not say another word. He just stood up, gave me one last look of pure, venomous hatred, and stormed out of the house, the defeated realtor trailing in his wake. The silence he left behind was a beautiful, peaceful thing. I stood alone in my grandmother's quiet dining room, the signed agreement, her final victory, in my hand. The house was safe. Her legacy was secure. The months that followed were a quiet and deeply profound transformation. I did not sell the house. I moved into it. I filled its quiet rooms with life again, with the scent of fresh flowers and baking bread. It was no longer a house of mourning. It was a home, and I was its keeper. True to my word and to my grandmother's brilliant posthumous plan, I established the Adelaide Vance Foundation, and every 3 months a very large check would arrive from my cousin Donovan's company, a check he was legally obligated to sign. His tough love lesson in financial reality, as he had once so condescendingly tried to teach me, was now a reality of his own. I used that money, his money, my grandmother's money, to fund all the things he had once called frivolous. We gave a massive grant to the local historical society to restore the town's oldest library. We established a scholarship for aspiring young artists at the community college. And our first major project was to buy the small, neglected plot of land next to my grandmother's house and, with the help of the community, transform it into a beautiful, sprawling public garden, a living, breathing tribute to the woman who had loved to get her hands dirty. My relationship with Donovan was now a purely professional one. Once every quarter, he was required to attend a board meeting with me to review the foundation's progress. He would sit, silent and sullen, in the same dining room where he had been defeated, and he would listen as I detailed how his hard-earned profits were being used to buy art supplies for underprivileged children and to plant heirloom roses in a public park. It was a quiet, sustained, and deeply poetic form of justice. It has been a year now. I am sitting on a bench in the newly dedicated Adelaide Vance Community Garden. The place is teeming with life. Children are laughing, an old couple is walking hand in hand down a path lined with flowers that Donovan's money paid for. I think about the letter, the one dated 50 years in the future. I realize now that my grandmother's true gift was not the money, or the power, or the revenge. It was a roadmap. It was a final, brilliant lesson, teaching me that a true legacy is not what you own. It is what you build for others. She did not want me to destroy my cousin. She wanted me to force him, against his own selfish nature, to participate in an act of goodness, to be a part of something better than himself. I did not lose a cousin that day. I gained a reluctant and very sullen business partner in the act of making the world a slightly more beautiful place. My grandmother had not just left me her house, she had left me her purpose. And that was an inheritance far greater than any amount of money. An incredible story of a grandmother's brilliant posthumous plan and a granddaughter's quiet strength. What do you think of the lesson Fiona taught her cousin? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were inspired by this story of constructive karma, please show your support by hitting that like button. And be sure to subscribe for more powerful and satisfying stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.